Now, eNCA is in possession of the details of Thabo Bester's supposed death that were handed to Home Affairs by officials of the Magaung Correctional Facility. These include forms filled in and affidavits filed. But is it possible to process an unnatural death in the time frame that it took 4 years, this so-called death? Our senior reporter, Aviwe Mtila, is keeping tabs on that development within this larger story, and he joins us from our studios in Cape Town. Aviwe, thanks for your time. How deep does this section of the story go here? Are we talking about incompetence? Are we talking about wide-scale criminality in terms of paperwork? Or is it a heady combination of both?
I think the latter is the answer, a heavy combination of both the incompetence and assistance, as we've picked up from even some of the officials within the correctional services itself. So it talks of glaring inconsistencies in the process that was supposed to happen. We do know, of course, according to the Correctional Services Act, that the first thing that's supposed to happen when an unnatural death happens in prison is that an inquest into the death itself is supposed to happen. So we have that documentation, in fact, right on my hand, that talk of just the glaring inconsistencies. We do know, in fact, another documentation that I received this morning, the post-mortem itself, that was signed off a day later on the 4th of May last year, that already indicated a number of things. For one, it indicated that the dead person that was found there, in fact, died before the actual fire. It indicated there was no smoke in inhalation in the lungs, and that there was a gash, in fact, in the head. So already that was at the disposal of correctional services. Also, the height, for example, we do know Thabo Bester's height, but this person that was found there was much shorter and also didn't weigh as heavily as Bester. So already the suggestions were there on the ground that that person was not Thabo Bester. But Correctional Services only says that they had this information just 2 weeks ago in March, almost a year later after this. So already a number of glaring factors. For example, the DNA itself, that body was not supposed to be released for burial up until DNA confirmed who the person was. In fact, the DNA can only be taken even by close family relatives such as the mother, even siblings. In speaking to some of the funeral undertakers, it is difficult to conduct DNA with the siblings. It has to be either by the mother or the father. So already the part that it's taken by Dr. Nandi Pamakutungana raises a lot of questions. In fact, I want you to take a listen to Professor Jacob Mofokeng, a crime expert, just on some of these glaring irregularities that happened in the release, not only of the supposed Bester body, but just in the correctional services in this whole process.
You cannot release a crime scene, until all the parties that process that particular crime scene are satisfied, and they discuss among themselves that from the collection of the evidence until the results are coming back from the lab that provides with the conclusive evidence that indeed, all the other aspects are covered, such as the physical evidence, fingerprints, and in this case, we can see that, the person was already dead, when the fire was set alight, and also the report indicated that the person died because of a blunt object. So in this particular case, there was supposed to be, an agreement, amongst the parties or stakeholders to say that we should not release this particular body. And then until then, we called the close relatives like the mother, and to be able to take a DNA, to check, despite the inconsistencies of the evidence, to indicate that this particular deceased, is shorter as compared with Thabo Bester, and probably the body mass is also a bit lighter as compared with that of an alleged, deceased person. So there were glaring, inconsistencies. So in this case, then the body was not supposed to be released, as well as the crime scene was not supposed to be released until all this evidence. And then the public was supposed to be informed that there are certain inconsistencies that were observed, during the investigation of this particular incident and henceforth then the body cannot be released to the family member, despite whether a particular person will come and cite religious observations and all those kind of things. But according to the South African law, a body cannot be released if a forensic evidence has not yet been concluded, the process has not been concluded.
Now, Aviwe, this entire Thabo Bester saga has taken place against the backdrop of what we're finding out more and more is a correctional services landscape where it seems like there are no rules and regulations that apply. Corruption is one thing, but it's a whole criminal system almost on its own that's been allowed to thrive inside there. What are you hearing about the circumstances under which a Thabo Bester type saga was allowed to take place?
I just shudder to think, Marcel, how widespread this is in these prisons. In fact, you just have to look at the Thabo Bester saga, some of what has been confirmed already. Even I remember that press briefing that took place just a day or two ago. Police minister suggesting that he had several names. One of them, he used one of the Motsepe names. One that he used, one he was in that tuxedo purporting to be in New York while he was actually in prison. So to even pull off such a stunt, you'd have to just imagine the number of people that were involved in there within the correctional facility itself, the money that was paid just for that to be allowed. So I just shudder to think how widespread just such maladministration, the corruption within the correctional facilities is. But one person that can give us that idea is, of course, anti-crime activist Yusuf Abramji. Let's take a listen to what he has to say.
Well, the big worry is, has this type of thing not happened to other inmates and other people before? The mere fact that these people got away with it for over a year does raise a lot of questions. How wide is the corruption and the irregularities within the Correctional Services Department? Do we have other inmates that really pulled off the same trick? That needs to be the subject of an investigation. It does raise a lot of questions. Clearly, the Department of Correctional Services and the Department of Justice has failed South Africans in this particular case. And there needs to be a massive investigation into the levels of corruption. We know that our prison officials are often very corrupt. We know inmates easily get drugs into prison. They commit crimes from prison.
We're going to leave it there, and I'm sure you'll be unpacking more of this story, or this section of the story, as and when it develops. That's Aviwe Mtila reporting to us live there from our studios in Cape Town.